The United States is not doing well as a nation. Even with its new president in office, things are not looking good. President Donald Trump is basically starting a civil war within his MAGA base. The first reason, of course, was the recent U.S. attack on the behest of Israel against Iran. But now, more importantly, at least for domestic consumption, is the belief that he is now complicit in a cover-up as it pertains to his refusal to release the Jeffrey Epstein files. Of course, Trump's openness to U.S. military involvement in the Israel conflict with Iran has sparked outrage amongst supporters who backed his America First promise to avoid foreign wars. I think publicly it's Tucker Carlson who called Trump complicit in the strikes on Iran's nuclear sites as being the most influential. But the likes of Candace Owens and Marjorie Taylor Greene, well, they've also sided with Carlson, warning that any more military adventures could fracture the base ahead of the 2026 midterms. But again, and more seriously, is Trump's ardent defense of Attorney General Pam Bondi's refusal to make public the Epstein files that has ignited the MAGA civil war, as she's claimed that no client list exists and ruled Epstein's 2019 death a suicide. What this represents, at least to many, is that whatever shred of trust that the government had is probably now gone and will never be coming back. Trump's Truth Social post urging supporters to move on from Epstein, well, it was ratioed, which is unprecedented, as a backlash on his own platform has never before happened. But what I think that people do not understand is that this past month, at least to me, and in my estimation, it has been an inflection point. This is not only an issue of MAGA, which is hated by half the country, I might add, but a clear indication that the US is now a totally dysfunctional society from top to bottom. And there are many now that believe that civil war is inevitable. Is it, though? Well, before we get into that, let's talk about something you can influence, and that is your health. And what am I talking about? Well, let's talk stem cells, your body's tiny repair crews that fix whatever's broken from your heart to your skin. Dr. Eric Berg, a top health educator on YouTube, well, he breaks it down here.
A stem cell is kind of like this reserve cell that can pretty much change into anything that you need. They're using it now to regenerate fibrosis, which then allows the heart muscle function to improve by 30%. They can do the same thing with liver fibrosis and damaged brain cells. They're getting great results stimulating new cartilage in your joint. Some people are using it for autoimmune diseases like MS, and also to help rejuvenate skin cells to actually make the skin young again. There's also stem cells for cancer.
That said, stem cell treatments like placenta injections can cost celebrities 50 grand a pop, but here's the game changer. Black Forest's cocoa flavanols. Studies including those from Harvard's Dr. William Lee show these flavanols wake up stem cells in your bone marrow, sending them into your bloodstream like bees from a hive to repair what needs fixing.
So, studies have been done to show that the flavanols in cocoa stimulate stem cells to come out of your bone marrow like bees in a beehive in your bloodstream, and they go out and they find wherever it needs to be repaired. If it's in your heart, they'll fix it. If it's in your liver, they'll fix it. If it's in your skin, they'll fix it. Well, clinical studies have been done with high flavanol cocoa to show that in like men who are in their 60s with heart disease, they could actually just have 2 cups of dark chocolate hot cocoa a day for a month. Yeah. And they doubled the amount of stem cells in their bloodstream, and their circulation improved measurably. And then what's even more important and impressive is that showed that eating high flavanol cocoa decreases the risk of cardiovascular death.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So we're not telling people to go out to have chocolate, which is a confection, which has got a lot of sugar and all kinds of other stuff in it. Yeah. But it's the stuff underlying
underneath it,
the core of it.
Mix this sugar-free 20-calorie cocoa into your coffee or shake. It's tasty and a stem cell power-up. If you're aging, recovering slowly, or feeling off, lazy stem cells might be the culprit. Cocoa flavanols can boost their circulation by 100%. And for the next 48 hours, grab Black Forest's High Flavanols Cocoa at 40% off using the link below. Stock up and unleash your inner fountain of youth.
What do you make of the fact that he says, you want a civil war on the streets of America?
No, that's just the opposite. I don't want a civil war. Civil war would happen if you left it to people like him. And I liked him. You know, I always got along with him. Never had a problem with him. But he's grossly incompetent.
Researchers at University of California, Davis uncovered what they thought are worrying levels of alienation from and mistrust of American democratic society and its institutions. In their recently conducted survey of 8,620 adults across the country, well, whatever the validity of their poll, what is clear is that there are serious and massive polarization forces currently ripping the United States apart from within. America is a country now marked with Venezuela-tier election systems, a corrupt judiciary, a bought and paid for government, institutional backing for lawlessness that can and does go on for months during the now regular rioting season, growing and visible poverty, as well as studies showing unprecedented collapse of social conditions within the United States, from indicators of human health to civic infrastructure. These are all hallmarks of past empires undergoing collapse. Or to put it more simply, a lot of people believe that the nation is headed toward a failed state, and not only that, but that America is a failed experiment that is teetering on the brink of civil war. What is true is that when using the common metrics that political scientists use to determine the signs of a failing state, well, the US checks many of those boxes. In fact, studies have shown that much of the illusion of democracy is just that, an illusion. After a rigorous analysis of voting from 1982 until 2002, a study entitled Testing Theories of American Politics, Elite Interest Groups, and Average Citizens. Well, the study showed that the preferences of the top 10% of Americans routinely trumped those of the average voter. Moreover, that the bedrock black-white narrative of America misses the point. In America, things do not only relate to racial issues, but especially ones of class, and that more people, no matter their race, are finding life harder and harder and harder. Poverty is accelerating, civil discourse is breaking down, social cohesion has evaporated. Americans have become extremely complacent to the idea that their current living arrangements are the norm rather than the exception, and the elite, for their part, believe that any manner of social or economic trauma can be ridden out by the sheer inertia of American power that many suggest is now running on fumes. The total and complete humiliation in Afghanistan and the abandonment of $80 billion in military equipment to terrorists, the summer rioting season that is germinated and magnified with glee by the mainstream media, a media that has completely lost all credibility with those that it means to influence, the complete loss of control of American cities sees weekly orgies of violence that make them resemble war zones rather than neighborhoods in a first world nation, and human interaction and commerce within those cities cease at dusk, with the expectation that marauding bands of addicts, criminals, and yes, a combination of both will and do take control of those streets until daybreak. In an era where the dogmatic currency shifts by the day and emerging anti-human concepts percolate from the depths of social science departments across the country, what is actually occurring is the attempted transformation in what the famed zoologist Desmond Morris calls the human animal, and our ability to stake territory and our group's rights to it against opposing claims to that same territory. And these distinctions grow in part of the belief that any amount of pressure can be exerted upon the nation, and the sheer weight of history, well, the nation will endure. But for anyone looking with eyes to see, this is idiocracy. Americans are now not only encouraged to separate themselves along uncountable lines of distinction, but also extol the virtue of celebrating these differences and call it a strength. And when looking at these socially engineered positions, well, it beggars belief. Facts that in any other time would be self-evident are not so in our current era of mental gymnastics and cognitive dissonance. The squealing cacophony of anything that repudiates ideology over demonstrable fact has become not the exception, but the norm. The politics of division are only intensifying, and people are now grouping themselves along political lines even more strongly than any other distinction. And no matter the changes in the composition of society, people will always find a way to wall themselves off into distinct categories, then use those categories to create hierarchies. It's always been this way. It will be this way so long as we are humans. And whether we like it or not, humans are animals. And like other animals on this planet, we have social systems that were born out of our long evolution on this planet. Now, previously, these disparate tribes could be brought together and their differences smoothed over by a super tribe. Rome did it. The West did it previously with the creation of nation states. But like Rome, the United States is tearing itself apart from within. And like Rome, as it regressed as a society and a civilization, as it tribalized from within, so too is America. But is America headed toward a second civil war? A lot of people seem to think so, and as stated, they are spurred on by algorithmically acceptable YouTubers that say as much. But I think what most of these people misunderstand is the difference between a civil conflict and a civil war. I can't see the country being carved up into two opposing territories fighting it out. There will never be another army of Northern Virginia. There will never be a California-led Western Alliance with armies drawn up of volunteers and conscripts. Yes, there are groups within the United States that hate each other, but most people just want to get about their lives. So given this reality, I think it would be all but impossible to draw up maps for a second civil war based on these criteria. As much of it, and these differences that Americans hold, much of these differences are urban versus the rest. With the current incarnation of American democracy, you don't even need to have skin in the game. The only thing a massive percent of the country wants and demands is largesse, more bread, and more circuses. They're not interested in a civil war. Now, what is absolutely much more probable is a civil conflict, and that civil conflict could take part within states or between states, and the actions would be similar to the troubles in Northern Ireland, for example, especially during an acute and prolonged economic crisis. I myself see the future in much the same way a mid-5th century Roman would, as he looked out and surveyed his crumbling empire. That is similar to our own time. Well, it was busy tearing itself apart rather than making arrangements for a mutually beneficial future. But by no means are these black pills. In fact, I believe that this video is one gigantic white pill, because the end of a thing is only the beginning of something new. Perhaps America could evolve into a devolved country, less federalized, where people can live where they feel most agreeable. This would be a more eminent solution than what we have today, with DC telling people what they need to believe and how they need to live. A return to the way America was meant to be, states that were united but sovereign. Now, perhaps also the removal of the Supreme Court that has become little more than a House of Lords that legislates from the bench. I would see this as a good idea, and we're also actually already seeing this with a few recent rulings throwing very contentious issues back to the states. Now, I'm just spitballing here. What do you think? Leave me your ideas and comments in the section below, and tell me whether you see a second U.S. Civil War on the horizon or civil conflict. Also, remember to check out the sponsor of today's video, Black Force Supplement, and their amazing products. Links, of course, are in the description. And with that, I will see you again in the next video. Bye for now.